Hello and welcome, all you gamers, grinders, and glory chasers, to the Esport Meta, your source for everything esports in North America. I'm your host, Billy Sims, here to chat with you about our main topic today, Overwatch Championship Series. It's starting to kick off. We're starting to see some rosters. We got some juicy details for you, but I'm not going to be the only one talking. With me, my co-host, Nicholas Layton. How you doing today, Nick?
I'm feeling so much better, man. My voice is so much better than it was for the last 2 weeks. So feeling pristine, peachy keen. You know what I mean?
Man, you got the right shirt on for this too, because we'll be talking about Overwatch, but we've got some news headlines, and I'm really glad to hear you're back to full health, or hopefully back to full health. You don't sound like
Close.
Kermit the Frog anymore. That's a plus.
Yeah, I'm close though. I'm close. I'm not 100%, but it's better than nothing.
Right. And as we know, you don't need your voice to be a gamer, but it does help if you're a podcaster. Let's get into the podcasting. So we're going to start off with some headlines. We're going to go through some stories, some hot tips, some new juicy details of things. And our first detail is actually from the WoW MDI. I'm going to share the screen real quick. All right. The Mythic Dungeon Invitational had a bit of a shakeup last weekend with Echo. Echo was favored to be the #1 team going into the competition, and as it started, they really showed their promise. They were grinding the dungeons, hitting up the best times, having some really interesting compositions, running 4 DPS at some points too. But they were upset at one point with a somewhat upstart team called Dogs, who knocked him down to the losers bracket, which was a big shock for a lot of people. Echo was able to fight back, and in that fight back, they had an amazing moment. The WoW YouTube channel shared this breakdown of it, and we're going to watch along and do a little bit of a react, but I'm also going to talk us through it, what happened, how it went, and it's pretty awesome to see. So let's get that started. All right, so the composition and the strategy happen on the dungeon Murazon's Rise. This is setting the stage. If you're familiar with it, the time lost infinite drakes, basically themed dungeon. It's with one of the newest patches from Dragonflight, and it was one of the newer dungeons in the MDI this competition. So the specific thing that happened with this dungeon is that there's a mob called I think it's the mage, the arcane mage, dragon mage. I apologize, forget, but this guy right here, and he has an ability called temporal loophole. Now, straight up, he's on a platform with 3 of his buddies that also do this ability, and upon his death, when you kill him, he drops a portal that, much like the warlock portal, you step into, you go to the other one. So it almost works in pairs. You kill one mage A, the portal drops, you kill mage B, they connect. All right. If you can see where I'm going already with this, you might be a professional WoW player or pretty savvy at this. Nick, what do you think? What do you think this tech is? What do you think they're doing? Okay, you're just stunned. I see. You can barely see. You're not moving. So I'm gonna keep explaining real quick here then.
Go for it. Go for it.
All right. Actually, yeah, no, I got it. Okay. So more or less, they're using this tech, and usually it's isolated to just one part of the dungeon. Here's the map of the dungeon. You start here, and then here's just generally the pulls that happen. And these infinite, what is it? Yeah, these infinite Twilight mages I believe, are the ones that are the ones that do it. Okay. So they usually all just live in the one zone, and then you kill them all, kill the boss, go to the next one. Echo broke out this very secret strat and surprised everybody, shaved off a ton of time, and was able to fight their way through the lower bracket and eventually take the dub, qualifying them for globals, for international later this year. So most of the majors, all 4 of the majors, are actually on the first platform. They were able to bring them from the platform to another platform, and then duplicate the other 2, do that with the last platform. Where is it? It's here. It is. I'm gonna let the video kind of demonstrate a little bit more. We're gonna watch it a little faster speed. So he's talking about it. Here they are on the platform. You can see the different mages. They're infinite battle mage. They're just clearing a regular trash mobs on their way to. Let's speed this up a little bit. They're clearing the trash on the way to.
So for people who don't know, they have to clear a certain amount of monsters inside the dungeon in order to be able to finish the dungeon on these speed runs.
Correct. It's another way to qualify them / throttle them. You have to jump through certain hoops. Usually what they'll do is they'll grab big packs and bring it to the boss, and so it's an efficient fight. You're fighting 50 things at once, cuts down time, but the more you pull, the riskier it becomes. They decide to pull everything on this platform except for the battle mages, the ones in circles. They keep them alive, and what they do is a nice combat trick. They go all night elf. They drop into shadow meld, drop in combat, are able to then stealth through the portals here on the sides, and bring them to the next one when they come back out of shadow meld, because it locks them into combat again. It's a very clever technique. Normally you have to fly with the dragons here, like they said, and that's where the time crunch really comes.
This jump is pretty ridiculous.
That's where the time crunch really comes. And that's what I want to spotlight right now, because it's not just a strategy of just cleverness. There is a precision in execution that needed to happen. So once they are locked in combat, a druid can't go back into stealth. So they have to get clever around it. And if they aggro this one, then it's going to pull the mage to here, which is not what they want. They want to pull the mage up somewhere else to the boss. Watching this, you can see that the druid is going to make a crazy jump at one of the highest levels of play, at one of the highest urgencies and risk factors. You're in the loser bracket. You're in losers bracket. You're in contention. You just got knocked down. You might have been boomed. You might be morally down. And here you are having to step up, make the play, show your hand. So here we go. Druid's going to use their ability, Wild Leap, and they're going to bypass the mage here. It's a wild situation. And if they hit combat, the whole thing gets messed up and they have to just reset. And they lose all the time that they started on. So it was a very risky play, but it looks like they've definitely had some practice on this. Here you go.
Yeah, no, these are super interesting, the way that they did these things, especially that jump. These speed runs that they're doing are absolutely crazy.
Right. And like in this one, it wasn't a do or die situation, but they needed to like just get back into safety, and like making this big swing on it. You can see the portal here. Here's one of them that they had linked up, that they're bringing. So they got one pair linked up. The tank gets ready. He's going to pull the last one so they can kill it. The warlock gets ready to summon them. And then overall, they start combat. They bring it forward. And they're able to kill a lot of mobs next to a boss and shave like 30 seconds to a minute, which is a huge amount of time. Ultimately winning, but yeah, it's such a wild example of cleverness and mechanics in game, and it was such a cool thing to see. Nick, do you ever think you could do something like this?
I'll be honest, like I love speed runs and like speed run access on Twitch and everything like that. So like I don't understand actually how these mythic dungeon challenges and stuff like that, these tournaments aren't more popularized, because they are one of the coolest things that everybody already watches for the most part, which is speed runs. Granted, the only difference is that these ones aren't like an any percent to where anybody can just jump in and start like understanding and realize what's like going on and what they need to do. Also, it's not a game that someone's played before, so people don't even realize that it really is just like a speed run. These things, they're phenomenal. Like I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I think I think getting a couple buddies together to even do some of this stuff. Like, granted, you can't get to the max level, but some of these speedruns are super awesome, and the more people play it, the more innovation that you'll see. More stuff like this where they're creative. What am I trying to say? Creative manipulation of dungeon mechanics that allow them to do specific things that someone hasn't seen before, or someone hasn't actually talked about or utilized in the past.
Right. And like speedrunning traditionally isn't on a live service game. Speedrunning is like a solve situation. Like speedrunning the original Mario game, they've hit a ceiling. Like there's ways to like get 0.4 seconds off their time, but like it's almost computer-esque manipulations of the code at this point because they've done everything a human could. So the speedrunning here, it's a low entry bar. Anybody could play the game, pay the $15 for the subscription, raid LFR, raid these dungeons with friends, and get into it. But then it has a high ceiling, skill cap, where this level they're doing it on plus 22 skills. The difficulty raises by number, so 22, 23, 24. I think 26 to 30 is the highest it has ever been, and I think it was kind of a fluke when like a 30 was done, but I digress. It's cool to see this happen in a live service game that's not solved, that's not exploiting code. It's cool to see them find little tidbit mechanics where they can use the mechanics of the class, of the character, of the abilities, as well as the enemies for this, and to pull it out on a competitive stage where it's like simple competition. It's a race. It's a foot race. Who can get from point A to point Z first while jumping through the hoops? Almost like a dog show. And that might be the best analogy for this. It's almost like a dog show. I'm sorry, Nick. You might have muted yourself.
I did. What did I was going to say? I'll let you talk about how it's like a dog show. I won't step in that lane. But no, like it's super impressive, and I really do seriously enjoy watching it. Like I watched all this weekend. It was a lot of fun just watching it. A lot of the things that happened, like sure, it wasn't as exciting as that one example, but it's always super. It's two teams racing. It's literally a race to do a speed run, and the way they go about it is different. Like seeing these guys think like, hey, let's all just race swap is pretty. It's pretty wild to even like just think about like, hey, you know what? All five of us get the race swap. Let's test it out. All right, this works. Let's move forward with it. Like that's kind of what is that? Like $30 a piece? It's like $150 just to try out a strategy. Like not a lot of people are going into tournaments like this, spending $200 just to try something out.
Well, yeah, and these guys like to compete on the highest level, and they've put the work in. They've definitely had to have like practiced that to figure that out, and then practice those jumps and those techniques with shadow meld timings, etc. So, but yeah, it's really cool to see how simple of a competition it is. And I'm looking forward to, I believe, Group C is happening this coming weekend, seeing if any more wildcard situations. Because even if there's not like a special situation, like a special case strategy like this, there was a match this weekend where it came down to the last boss. The two teams were racing, and they were 1% apart. So that's like less than a millisecond, less than a second of competition that somebody basically stepped the wrong way, hit the wrong button, or just changed a little bit of the trajectory where it killed the boss first. And like that is super duper exciting. I'm just going to be a little bit of a nerd here, just push my glasses up and be like, wow, guys, that's so amazing. But it really is. And it's such a simple competition, like fighting games to watch. But
no, it was super fun. And when that actually happened, it was pretty funny that the casters specifically were like, hey, everybody calm down. I know it says it's like 1 second difference on the screen, but we are not connected to this whatsoever. We started our timer. So like relax, this is getting down to the millisecond. And like it was very close for that game.
Yeah.
Which was it was crazy.
So I know I'll be looking ahead, especially for the global invitationals later this year, when all the better teams, the teams that pull out these strategies are now competing for big money. But in the meantime, we've got a few more headlines today, especially today, Pokemon Day. an official holiday by Nintendo and Game Freak. They decided to announce some game updates, which we're going to run through, and one specifically that impacts the Pokemon card game. We do have Pokemon Invitational International at London happening in April, so this will likely impact that. So brought to us by Polygon, we can see they have a whole presentation video today from Pokemon. They announced Pokemon Legends, another game, another bold take on games with Pokemon rather than just the same side-scrolling kind of thing. But the big one is this Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket. It's a bit of a mouthful, but more or less, they're debuting another app for your phone from mobile where you can trade and buy Pokemon cards digitally with each other. The Pokemon game, trading card game, has always been great when it comes to getting new cards and being able to build decks and sharing that with friends by trading, etc. So they've always been great about community, but the last iteration kind of suffered from a development issue with it where they didn't really have the ability to. It was more about loot boxing. Now looks like they're adding this app. Maybe it's a cash grab. Maybe, we have to see what happens with it, how they design it and everything. But like I said, they're generally pretty good guy, honest about these things. Off your initial, you're the card guy here, Nick. Off your initial bat, did you see the news today? Have you any sort of like initial thoughts with it?
So no, my initial thoughts just hearing it right now. I haven't heard anything about it tonight because I've been pretty busy today. But when it comes to like Pokemon in general, the cards aren't that expensive. Like you can play a tier 1 deck $100 out of the gate, 150 maybe in whatever meta it was. During the Charizard meta when Charizard was super huge like 3 months ago, you could have got I built one for $37. Like it was a tier 1 deck. Now it's going around stomping.
Right. We're not talking about first edition foil Charizards from 1999, right? That like would sell for $1,000 or 10 grand.
No, this was just like the new version of a Charizard in the new pack, whatever it might be. This happens all the time. You get new versions of the card and stuff like that.
Yeah.
New ways to play. But the thing about Pokemon is like something that you have to really know would be that digital. It might not make sense in general, and they might not be able to make money off of it because of how cheap a lot of these cards are, like just physically. Like so cards that are really, really great because it's just we'll call it the ugly version, right? The version A, where version C is the one that everybody wants. It's the borderless, shiny, really awesome art, which they're able to do. Those ones are worth hundreds of bucks sometimes, but the cheaper ones are $7, like stuff like that. So I'm not sure how much money they'd be able to make off of like trying to cash in digitally. Especially with like the way the old card game used to work. The old card game was very trade intensive and stuff like that. So
right, but that
you were able to make it.
That might be the point here, right? They already have a huge collector base for the physical cards. We know about shiny hunters. That Pokemon is a whole special breed of people that really do love shiny hunting, really do like the collectible aspect of it, even the mainstream games, the mainline games. So this might be not so much a digital push to double dip on money because, well, that's another thing. Just realizing when you buy a pack of Pokemon cards, they usually give you a code where you get those cards then digitally. So spending the $5 on a pack, you get the physical card as well as the digital card. So it's not really like, I don't think it's going to be a money chase on this one. It might be a competitive chase. Like they're just building a competitive scene, allowing the entry for anybody to get into it to be a lot easier, a lot simpler. So, and that's kind of like the vibe you get from Pokemon, especially with internationals coming up in April. It's a big time to market. Anybody can play, anybody can jump in. I know $150 sounds pretty big for kids or for teenagers, but $150 is reasonable because we're going to talk about in a second MTG Magic the Gathering decks and whatnot. But Nick, what are some of the price points for entry on those cards, just to compare and contrast?
Like usually standard in Magic is supposed to be about $200, but that has not been the case. It's like usually like $500. And like Magic suffers from old time formats. So like old time formats are extremely popular still. So the only way to get new cards into these metas, into these older metas, is to print more busted cards, like more power creep comes into the game, and that leads to like these pretty expensive cards in standard. And like one of the more recent ones is like a mythic rare that's worth $100. It's called Shieldred. It's a really good card, solid card. It doesn't even see that much play compared to like another card, but it's like $100. Like,
yeah, and like I know in the past, the Wizards, especially the last year, Wizard of the Coast has had some criticisms about how much they're kind of tapping that player base for money, how quick they're releasing cards, how they're releasing promotional sets. They had a My Little Pony promotional set, which apparently was busted. It's kind of a fun thing to do, but like some of the cards were ridiculous. Has there been any other sets like that? Like I believe
the more recent set that like really changed the way the whole format went, the whole meta, was the Lord of the Rings set. Like the first Lord of the Rings set introduced a lot of like really, really interesting cards. And one of them just ended up being Orcish Bowmasters. Is like I played Legacy, and it's the second most played card in the format.
Really? And isn't Legacy like any card ever?
Yeah, except for like the restricted list. There's a ban list and everything like that, but essentially like my deck could be $2,000 to $6,000, right? And then this card is now $40. It's the second most played card in the format. So, and that came out. It's not a standard card though. That's the only difference, is that they release like these weird sets.
That's really crazy because like Magic's it's 30 years old, isn't it? And like they just had an anniversary. So like literally the second most played card is a card that just came out within the last year, and it's competing with all these cards for the last 30 years. That's really interesting to me, really compelling. But let's move back into the Pokemon stuff, specifically, obviously, with the app that's coming out. I want to read a little bit more about it. Now we got our opening remarks. In Pokemon trading card game Pocket, players will be able to enjoy the thrill of opening booster packs and collecting cards, showcasing special visual effects. So that sounds like there might be a digital component of like animations to the shinies or to special.
It sounds like Yu-Gi-Oh! It sounds like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Version of Magic. I'm not even joking. Like this is going to be a tool disc.
Right. Do you think this also means like an AR, like or a VR situation?
I mean, like it could, but that's never the way you should go with your card game. It's that route. But
why is that?
It's just not what people want to play.
I know,
I'm not playing a card game to play like a virtual reality game. And like you could play a virtual reality game that has like a card game in it, but
that's where that's where the AR part of it might be really cool, because it'll take the card, it'll see what it is, and then for a viewer watching the competition, it might spark some, especially because the Pokemon is very animated, it's very cartoony. It's had the anime and the cartoon forever. It's the mainline games. You've seen the Pokemon sit there and go, fire breath.
I mean, personally, I think if that's the case, I think that they need to do a little survey and see how many people turn off animations. Because you know, I'm one of those.
It might be a competitive edge thing, because competitors competing. I'm going to say competitors competing a bunch, because that's a tongue tire. But competitors competing, they might want lower settings to boost their performance. But I don't know, like words and phrases in the PRs, like immersive cards, might be leading to, they're looking for that digital collectible animation, that cool factor, as well as that whole playing an entry level, bringing people in.
I would assume that this is more to pull in the Pokemon Go fan base, because a good majority of the Pokemon Go fan base that's left over are not incorporated in the rest of the franchise for the most part. Like they might have a game, but they are not incorporated in the like they are Pokemon fans, not Pokemon fanboys, right? Like it's
a much different sort of approach to the game. But like also with that, Pokemon Go has taken a little bit of a dip as far as population playing it, but it's still huge. It's still global. There's still a huge competition scene, and there's still a huge player base in general. But noticing right now, if continuing reading, skipping ahead to this, it's players will be able to open 2 booster packs every day at no cost, which feels great as a competitive player. Kind of just like you get no worries, kind of freebie chase twice a day.
That's pretty. It's crazy. It sounds crazy, but a Pokemon act like if you didn't know, Pokemon, their digital version of the game has always been very, very nice to the player base. Even before the most recent update and everything like that. Before when it was like the actual app and everything like that, it was awesome to play. It was a much better than like Hearthstone. You name it. Gwent. Like it doesn't really matter. Like it always preferred to just keep you on the app playing and giving you stuff rather than you going to find like another game.
Well, yeah, and like in that way too, Pokemon and Nintendo and Game Freak all like to focus on the demographic. That's why like Smash Bros has had a hard time competing, even though it's a very competitive game. Nintendo always kind of wanted to pull it back into a party game. So it's cool to see these changes. It's cool to see these mindsets where they're still keeping the door open for anybody, and they're allowing these low floor skill caps of entry so that people can jump in, keeping costs low so that it's a lot of fun. And that's really what competition has to be about, because who knows who the next champion is going to be, which is a very big Pokemon mantra, right? I want to be the very best.
Yeah. And I mean, like one cool thing about Pokemon tournaments, if you ever go to one, they like most of the time on weekends, it'll be on like a Sunday at one LGS, like a local game shop. And it will be like parents bringing like who play Pokemon, who bring their kid, and those kids love playing Pokemon because they've been like, brought in with their parents and stuff like that. Right. So they enjoy it as like a thing to do with their parents. Again, this is another way to get parents and kids like involved together playing the same Pokemon game. The card
right,
game, so.
Right. So this app, the Pokemon Trading Card Game Pocket, is set to arrive in 2024. So we've still got a bit of time probably, and it'd probably be another Zoom TM kind of thing. They do have a couple other announcements, but it's only important, I think, to the international, where they might be changing some of the meta moves, might patch noting some of the lineups and stuff. But really, that's all we need to really figure out, right? There's no competitive Pokemon Cafe yet, but we'll see. We'll see. To your point, like Pokemon has been such a nostalgia thing for kids, because it's also been such a nostalgia thing for adults, like people our age, I guess, have been playing it for such a long time, and now their kids are jumping on board with that. So it is cool to see Pokemon making that entry easy enough for the kids, for people, bringing people's skill levels up. Because they're able to get the cards, right? They don't have to buy a $2,000 Black Lotus, $8,000 Black Lotus. No,
sometimes just like the retail products that Pokemon sells are legitimate. Like they'll just have a card that you'll need for a competitive. Like instead of just like buying packs, it'll literally go like, here's 3 cards of the card that you need and 5 packs. It'll cost you $20, and like you can just get those, and it'll be like a special promo version of that card. Yeah. And granted, that's not the one everybody wants. Everybody wants that cool, nice, beautiful Charizard flying in the sun, with the clouds and everything. But like, a lot of people would just go, I'll just spend $20 so I can go play.
Yeah. Well, that's the vibe here. They've got the collectors already in the bag. Now they're going to move into the competitor space. And it's cool to see that them making that happen. But unless there's anything else with the Pokemon, we've got our next headline to move into. It's another card game, Magic the Gathering. We did just have a 75K standard open tournament happen in Chicago this past weekend. This is kind of impressive because you've informed me too. Standard is like the backbone of play for this stuff, and for them to have a total prize pool of $75,000 is huge. Big. Just show up, pay your entry fee of $150, and if you're good enough, you got a chance to win 15K first place. There's some luck that's involved, of course, because it is a card game, but even if you place 96th, you get $250, paying for entry fee and a little extra for you. Nick, you're bigger on the card games. Like you said, you're a card game expert. What was your vibe about this tournament that happened this past weekend?
So this tournament was super cool. Sultai Control, which was like the name of the deck that came out, and it was the only one for the most part in the top 64 of this version of this deck, and it was just under like $500. It's like $489 just to even play it. But it is completely different from the way a lot of other decks in the format end up running. And like this one, just to give you a heads up, this is 36 lands in this deck, and that's just a resource that you need in order to play cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
The next deck underneath it is 25, so it had 11 more lands than most decks. Like maybe like give or take like 2 lands, but essentially 10 lands they were over. Maybe even 13 sometimes from some people compared to a lot of these other decks.
Other than the land count, what was special about this deck? Why do we want to spotlight this?
So it was land centric,
Okay.
basically because like it had a lot of cards that revolved around using lands, or when lands come into play, stuff like that. Like a lot of creatures themselves, like when a land is put to a graveyard from anywhere, put a +1/+1/1 on this creature. It's 3 mana, and it's a 3/3. And then would be like certain cards that like mill, the top card of your library, stuff like that. So return all lands from the graveyard to the battlefield. So basically, like you're tossing cards into the graveyard as far as lands, and you're only playing 14 creatures. There's only like a couple spells. There's not many cards because half of your deck, more than half of your deck, is just lands. So it's essentially just playing off of lands themselves, like when lands come into play or when lands are in the graveyard. And the biggest one was a card called Terror Tide. Like Terror Tide's a really strong card. It's only 49 cents, and basically it's because I give all creatures -X equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard, and lands are considered permanent. So you're basically like dumping cards into the graveyard, wiping the field, and then bringing all your lands back, and then you're casting huge humongous dunga creatures. Like
I could see the deck strategy there. I could see the win conditions happening and rolling out with it. But with that specifically, why is that deck surprising? Because it's land heavy, but like, why does that normally not do well? Like you said, it placed top 64, and like you don't usually see it, or what was that about?
It's not specifically like the lands, because like landfall has like playing around lands or abilities that involve lands has always been around in Magic. Like it's come out a lot more recently in the last like 10 years. But the real big thing is that the next, I don't want to say it's just not a normal version of Magic. It's kind of like an anti-metagame deck. Where it's mostly metagaming on it's mostly metagaming on people with like who go low to the field, like go underneath the bridge rather than over it. Yeah. And so that's usually like pretty expensive cards, like the Shieldred card that I talked about, which is like $110. It's a 4 or 5, and it has an ability on it anyway. But
yeah, and you said
that's like the biggest thing.
And you said that this deck placed 64th.
So no. The Sultai Control placed first. That's the one who won the $15,000. Oh, it was the only deck that was running this, like in the top 64. So there's other there might be like small variations that are out there that might be running like another color, but for the most part, like from what I was able to like look at, and I mean there's a lot of decks to really like look at. There's like the top 64 end up being not really filled with the Sultai Control.
Gotcha. I think I pulled it up too, placing first. And here's like the deck list and the side deck of what they were running. Is this the correct? It doesn't look like it has.
Let me see. Yeah, no, that's it.
All right.
Yeah, it doesn't look like much, right? Like it just looks like lands to you. Yeah, exactly. And so basically, like there's another version of this like deck that was in standard that was doing pretty well. And it was mostly just like, ramp, get a lot of lands, then go into big creatures, control the board. But this one just does it better. than the other one. It's just
Gotcha.
better version of it, and it looks like somebody basically like took what was working and said, I don't like a color, and then just went and then just
I
changed
just
it.
pivoted hard, yeah.
Yeah, just a hard pivot with a similar style thing. So
But it's still kind of crazy too, because like literally initially they had a 12-1 record with one draw, 12-1. Let me go back there. 12-1. And then the deck only costs $453, which is pretty low for Magic standards, right?
It's about average for like
Average?
for the standard. Could be anywhere from $300 to $500, but
All right, because that's kind of what we're seeing here in the top 10 list currently.
yeah, it's like most of the time. Let me see. I don't think there was too many. Not too many cards that are really like super expensive for the first place deck.
Actually, Nick, take a look at what is it? Top 8. The first one, it was Solte Emergence or Solte Control versus Solte
What was his
Red.
name?
I'm sorry?
What was his name? Brian Zhang?
Brian Zhang.
Different deck.
So like it's a different deck, but it's the same deck?
No. Like similar name. So like whenever the Sultai is just colors.
Okay.
So Sultai is usually the green. It's not usually, like that's what it is. It's blue, green, and black.
Gotcha.
Is what Sultai is. So and
Yeah,
then like you see how this says Demir mid range, and number 2. Demir is black blue. Azorius is blue blue white. So that's what I mean when I said I know.
Yeah. No, I mean like it's very Magic the Gathering. It's very like we're wizards and we have specific words to cast the spells. But like that's pretty cool. I like that. It is like a code. It is a speak that brings you into the know in the competition.
There's lore there, just so you know. Like there's lore and people, which is the reason why those are like one of them, like black red, is called Rakdos, and there's a guy, Rakdos is his name. So like it has reason to it and everything like that, and they're like it's there. And half the time I'll say I don't remember it, but I'll remember it if you like were to ask me out of nowhere. I'd be like, oh, it's Sultai. But if you like ask me on the spot, I'm like, I have no idea.
Right. And with that, I mean, that's any other notable things about this tournament? I mean, that Sultai won $15K for that placement, that deck. They're seeing a lot of prize pool. Like any other notable decks or plays that we were able to see?
Not specific, because I wasn't able to watch a stream of this one. Just because it was a Saturday, I was watching some other stuff. But for the most part, it's the same cards that we've seen for the most part. A big one, there's just a card that probably should get banned, as it's in like so many decks.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to speak on that on the actual thing. But there's just some decks that were there that ended up being like $300 that ended up being top 8 that were under the amount that people were really like are average, 340, 342. So it was a pretty accessible as far as standard is concerned, and that's only going to get better because it's every 3 years now. Does the format rotate? So it's pretty interesting to see how things like are going to parse out going forward with 3 years being like these cards that they're playing and buying right now are here. They're here to stay for a little bit. So
no, that's cool to see. It's cool to see that big prize pool. Do you know when the next big standard open's going to be, or if there's going to be another one like this year?
Not. I mean, there's got to be. Like we're on 2024. Not to say it's going to be 75,000. But standard is what Wizard is pushing for all the Pro Tour. So as we get the Pro Tour kicking, you'll see more and more tournaments, and that's where you can get points. You can make it to Worlds. You can do a lot of fun stuff. And one cool thing, if people play card games, that they should know, if you want to go back to where it showed the whole entire like deck list, where it showed the picture of it, there's a card. Let me see if I can find it. It's called Fairy Mastermind. In the second deck, the Demir aggro or whatever. And I'm only pointing out this card because if you want to be a person who is immortalized in a card game that you enjoy, Wizards of the Coast is a pretty cool way to do it, considering that if you do win Worlds, you get a card with your face on it and work on a card. So as you can see at the bottom, the world champion right here at the bottom, he's got his whole thing. That's his card, and that's his face. Yeah, that's his face on the thing, and like it's a pretty good card overall. It's not as good in Legacy because of another card that came out from that they put out after this card came out, by the way. So it was kind of like a middle finger almost, but like that's neither here nor there. But
wait, tell me
you have a card.
Tell me that counter card. Tell me that card that counters this.
It's called Orcish Bowmaster. It's the second most played card in Legacy. Okay.
Well, I was gonna ask if it's like a rival to this this player. That'd be really funny if like you and I were rivals and we're enemies and I win, but then next year you win and you make a card that like squashes my card.
that would be cool. I mean, like, dude, this is one of the coolest things. Like, this was around when I first started playing Magic, and then they got rid of it for a while, and now they're starting to like bring it back with like these last couple of years. This is like one of the coolest things. Like, it's what get people out there to play. Like, you love the game, you have an idea for a card, and you want to like try to win and get your card made. Like, go for it. It's pretty cool.
It feels very 80s movie, very like
Wizard.
Game Master, Wizard. Like, yeah. But that's awesome. That's really cool to see. I'm looking forward to learning more about this. I only touched on Magic the Gathering and card games very briefly, but 75K prize pool is pretty solid. And for top 8 to be bringing home like 10K, big thumbs up in the world of competitive esports and gaming. Good prize pools there. But moving on to the next subject here, we have a bit of a transition. We're going to be moving into our main topic. It's a main topic, but it's a one that we keep kind of like sprinkling in week to week here. It is Overwatch season. Esports are kicking off. The Asia region has started their competitions, but in doing so, they've announced the finalized rosters, and that's really what the main topic here is. And that's the thing I'm like super excited about, because you're seeing how these lineups are now evolving / been solidified and committed. And like, this is what the tournament is going to be. So I'm going to start by sharing that a lot of my information was from Commander X. He was an assistant coach and a coach on the London Spitfire for the Overwatch League. He's been in the scene and done a lot of work, and now he's doing some content creation as well as coaching. And specifically, he's laid out this very, very awesome video about Roster Mania, they're calling it, of course, because it's now all the news is coming through. And we get to see the lineups as they solidify. He does a wonderful job from his point of view, especially as a coach, because he's also like presenting you as like you're the team owner, what you should do if you were the owner, if you were playing and you could pick up these rosters, if you were the GM. But more or less for our purposes, we're just going to use this as reference to the teams and the compositions and the players that they have. So first and foremost, we talked about this already. This was announced previously, is the Toronto team. Toronto is going to be actually the Overwatch League esport organization, the Toronto Defiant. They're continuing their journey in Overwatch esports. And they're able to do it in a very specific way because they're picking up Overwatch League champions, recent champions, as well as bringing these guys to Toronto, having them live in a dedicated team house or apartments and then practice in a facility. And that's really cool to see. Specifically, he was on the Florida Mayhem last year, won the champion as the tank. Sugar Free and Merit, very notable. Merit, I believe, was also on the championship team, the Florida Mayhem. Sugar Free was a bit of an upstart, but he's been notarized and has hit peak hype from fans as well as other players. As like, he's somebody to look out for in the right meta, especially I think on like a Genji Tracer meta. And then for the support lineup, they've got RuPaul and Vega. RuPaul being another seasoned veteran, winning the championship, and then Vega being a contenders player that really had a big reputation, but never broke into the Overwatch League. I think partly because of age and the age restrictions of being 17, 18 to make that move. For me to keep monologuing here and talk about the the rosters a bit more, we do have Kaluj, Sam, Seeker, UV, Liar. It is a team that has been American Tornado in a lot of previous iterations, but it's nice to see them kind of like reassemble a bit and come together as this FA team. Um, overall, like there's a lot of different options you can make with these guys. You've got people in North America and like Hawk or Mikey, as well as Dante in the Doomfist tank meta. He really struggled in LA, but most of that probably wasn't him. He was the quiet rock that just steadily did his job and did the thing and then got a lot of the blame because of probably coaching and strategy and maybe other players who just didn't rise to the occasion. But anyway, Dante is going to be on Maryville. It's a college esports organization. So the lineups are really interesting for that because you've got these official Overwatch League esport organizations that have now converted into OWCS teams, basically. Then you've got these collegiate level stuff. Nick, try to just pass this along to you with kind of the star power that I've kind of shared with it, maybe not knowing as much. What's your vibe and thoughts on like a quote unquote professional esports organization competing against collegiates or the rise of collegiates? Any thoughts or opinions in these areas for something like Overwatch?
It's fun.
It's fine.
It's super fun. It's super fun. And like the reason for it is, right, it's because like sometimes I like the personal experience, and I'll reference something like, because I go to NTG tournaments, right? Like legacy tournaments. I'm by no means a professional, but sometimes, round 2, I face a professional and I give him the dollywop. Like it's like he just gets the dollywop like that, and that's just fun. Like you go to a tournament, you pay your $50, you beat a pro in a round, and it's like, yeah, you didn't walk out with like the top 8 because of X or Y reason, doesn't even matter. But you have a nice experience at just laying it down on somebody who's like a professional. It's fun. Some people get freaked out by it, but it's really awesome to be able to play against professionals or people who you look up to or just people you think are better than you. And you get to find out sometimes that it's not,
right.
They're not as like far away as they might seem, right?
Right.
Especially in like these esports games.
Walking in, people having reputations really does a lot in that intimidation factor. But when you can rise to that occasion and compete against them or with them, it's a very great feeling. And like, this is interesting too. I'm going to go back into that roster because that Dante roster on Maryville College, it's not like Dante's a professional. He was professional. He's been in the league for like majority of it. I think 5 of the 6 years. But he's competing currently with like Luca Mino, who was also in the league for a while, right? But then they have other players like King or Vision who might have been contenders. Either way, they've all sort of been playing at this level. They've all been a top 500 rank kind of vibe. It's just that against Toronto, you're playing against 3 people who've won the grand finals last year. They have an official organization, an official team, a facility. And it's more of that franchised mentality of like, hey, we're a dedicated city space organization versus this collegiate where it might have different sort of resources. And then you've got the things that are in between. Like I believe FA team, who's pretty noticeable as it is, they're just like people coming together and playing the game. And like that might be like the low end of the spectrum. And like I think each has its pros and cons because like college, especially with the world now for Overwatch, is that you can only have 2 imports. Everybody needs to be from the region, and it's a solid rule to like just showcase different talent rather than the same talent over and over again. So like you have something like a college team, they might be able to incentivize an expat or a foreign player to import here and like double dip them because maybe they can't pay them, but like they can give them room and board and they can offer them a college degree. And then you compete on this. And then you wait for a Toronto to come in to offer, hey, here's apartments here. We're going to fly you out. Here's a salary. Like Like on
Yeah,
that scale.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say you just made me think of it. Like, what what's the behind the scenes for all these people who are professionals going into a collegiate sport, right? Like, one, you're going down, not up, right? So regardless of what anybody wants to say, he's stepping on somebody because now he's taking over that college spot from a person who could be going to college, right? And could want to do this, and now he's just stepping on that person instead of like getting like because he's on on a
Right. But with that,
open league.
there's always going to be that competitive ness to a roster like that. In general, you're playing basketball. There's 5 people to get on the court, maybe what, 11, 15 people that play. So you're competing for a high demand spot anyway. And regardless if it's somebody coming top down, you're still going to have other people your level competing. So the competition is always there when it's fighting for a roster spot.
Sure.
And like, it is a bit of a walk down as far as notoriety, maybe even for salary, but like college is the foundation for the NFL and football that way. And it's been able to grow that and offer scholarships as well as non,
Well, that's my thought, right? Is like,
non-salary.
is he
Yeah.
a student?
Yes. He's a student now. And that was
Okay, so now he's a student. He got brought in. We gave him a scholarship for Overwatch, so he didn't take a pleb off the street who he had to write an essay just to get into this college, right?
I think he specifically he's an interesting story. I think he's going for a marketing degree or a psychology degree, which feels very like basic, like, but like that works, you know, it works. It's good.
I went for communications while getting my my sponsorship and everything, getting everything there. So I don't know.
Right.
Like we can only have two people from outside the US like join these teams, right? 2 foreign members on the team. So that's the weird part, right? Is like you have people who are in college, like but now you gotta sign up for school. And now are their grades like if they don't keep their grades up, can they get kicked off the team? Like that's no shot. I would assume no effing way is that even happening. There's no shot that they're gonna have somebody come from a professional. It's like taking a professional baseball player to play in your college level baseball team. You are going to do whatever that man wants, and you're going to keep that person happy as long as they're like at least maintaining the value you saw to get them there in the first place, right?
Well, I know
and
there's
so like that's my thought.
I know there's non-compete. So if you are on let's say the Yankees as a baseball player, you couldn't play for another team unless it's like a charity thing, right? Or you got traded. Otherwise, right? Like you are offering the scholarships, and like look at like college sports currently. Though you know some of those star athletes in basketball, baseball, lacrosse, football, any of those, wrestling team, volleyball, whatever. Like even the lesser sort of sports. You know, they're doing like courses like basket weaving and they've got tutors, and like maybe esports is less demanding, ironically, but unironically might actually be more demanding. But like football, they're traveling. That's what I mean. Like they're going across the country for some of those big schools. These guys are going to be on a computer playing, you know, Ethernet competitions versus LAN stuff. But either way, there's some more rosters I want to get through as we're kind of running short with time. That it makes for an interesting conversation. It makes for a very valid sort of observation and like seeing how things are going to develop, because you have the incentives for college here. It's schooling, it's room and board, and like even if you're bringing an import in from another country, like that's the incentives that you don't have to pay them. You can offer them a scholarship or offer them just like, hey, come to our school kind of thing. You get a degree from this, so they're not wasting their time, versus like, you know, a Toronto who's paying for apartments, likely paying for a team house or a facility, or just, you know, you, me, and the boys are going to get together and we're going to compete in Overwatch next week and we're just going to pool our money together, right? Like those are still better options than that last one.
I mean, true, but I got so many questions when it comes to like the college business inside of a college. But anyway,
right. And like just moving on to the rest of the roster sort of stuff. The Asia region's already sort of started competing. So we've seen finalized rosters, not just speculative or not just like adjusted rosters, because some of those North American teams, it's still in the running. They sign on to a college, but they could get poached by a professional team like Toronto or somebody else to just give them money. Here's $60K to play a video game, and But
It is,
anyway,
because it's an open, right? They could just get pulled into another team.
exactly.
Regardless.
And like some of those teams are competing in multiple regions. So that import might be moving to North America for part of the season, or then competing in EMEA and with the rest of her team when he's not an import. But anyway, Korean Overwatch has started, and there's been some very, very, very big notable, and I need to talk about this. And I don't know, Nick, if you're going to be excited about it, but I'm sure as hell am, because we've got the return of Runaway. You actually saw these guys play. You're wearing the shirt that you saw them play at the grand finals in 2019 in Philadelphia.
Did I?
Runaway was picked up by Vancouver Titans, the full roster. Titans famously botched that the following year, and during that game they got 4-0'd by San Francisco, which was a strong team, but I believe that was the Zarya Bastion meta. Anyway, Runaway, the organization, is back. They've picked up Prophet, Zest, Mag as their tank, Lige Gon, Vigilante. These are all Overwatch League pros and like seasoned veterans, and they know what they're doing. And it's still Runner who's running the organization with his wife out of Korea, which is awesome to see. It's been a fan favorite, and it's cool to see how well these guys are going to do. Do any of these names ring a bell for you, Nick?
Prophet, Zest, and Mag are the three that Vigilante probably, but that's just a generic word.
That's his gamer tag, right? And like in the league too, there's Prophet with an I, Prophet with an F, Prophet, this Prophet,
No, I know that Prophet.
All right, but moving on to another notable is going to be probably the Forerunners, the number 1 seed, and likely it's going to be Team Falcon. This is kind of a team that was picked up in a similar way that Toronto was, but by an organization that wasn't like in a quote unquote official sense. We've got Proper, that MVP Rookie of the Year, who was banned a couple weeks ago for smack talking. Stalker, Smurf, Hanbin as their tanks. Like these are people who've won championships. These are people who've been around and done the work. Rollstar, like notable. These are all people who have played in the Overwatch League. Proper, Smurf, Hanbin, Shio, Fielder, Surmajet is an import to South Korea, and can't complain on that one. But this was a roster that was kind of made and then kind of picked up by a studio, an esports studio that would pay. I mean, for the rest of these, I can kind of pick in Poker Face, though. Poker Face was a what's it called? The contenders team or open division team that made it to the Overwatch League last year because they won. They won out and they got to compete in like the regulated system that they had last year, which is really cool to see. Another big thing is WAC. Lip is the Sombra Master. He's saying as their Hideo, Jungbin, Max. Again, a roster full of experts in their field as supports, and it's so cool to see how this is going. The one roster that's not on here that I do want to mention is I think it's called Unemployed. The team is Unemployed, but it's a bunch of retired Overwatch players from before. They played Overwatch League, they played in Apex previously, and they were able to get back together and like come back and just have fun with it. And I want to see a lot more of that as a fan, just to have fun with it. So Nick,
it's a different league, bro. That's a different league. That's the grandpa league. you gotta get take that somewhere else.
You've got these classic legends coming back and just trying to throw their chip into the race.
I will say I really, really do love when Korea imports people. Like I love it. Like you get a European or American gets imported to Korea. I'm like, I want to watch it. I'm gonna watch every game.
How good do
this game right now?
How good do they have to be for that? Right?
Correct. They have to be absolutely cracked, dude. But it's ridiculous, and it raises your opinion of them, right? Like my opinion of anybody who goes, not just because they go there, but because of the fact that they'll go there and then they'll perform well.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, all right. Let's see who was holding you back for the last 5 years, buddy. Like check marks on those boxes.
I mean, we could probably name some opinion names where we feel like that, but unfortunately, that's kind of all the time we have for right now. Leaving us a lot to talk about in the future, a lot to look forward to with the Overwatch Championship Series coming up. And North America and Europe are about to kick off March 1st, which is in about a week, less than a week. And Asia region is already popping right now, and we'll hopefully see all the great things we want to. Nick, thank you for joining me. Any final words or thoughts before we head out?
No, just have fun and don't
Awesome.
respond to people in the game. Just play the game.
Don't talk, play the game, show them up with action rather than words, right? We're gonna just recite the scrub word prayer every week now.
If you're typing, you're not playing. That's fine. That's fine.
Words of wisdom from Nick Layton. If you're typing, you're not playing. And if you're not talking, you're not podcasting. And that's it for our podcast, Esports Meta. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to hit like, subscribe, do the internet things because it really helps us out and it shows the algorithm that you also like what we're doing here. Join us next week at 7 o'clock, time difference, dilation. Join us 7 o'clock for our next episode. That's all from Billy, Nick, and thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time. Oh, I gotta play the video. I forgot. I gotta play the video, Nick. Here we go. See you next time.
See you next time.